Welcome to the Close Encounter Club. I'm your host, Justin Gearhart. This week we're diving into a legend that's haunted the hills of Connecticut for generations, the Black Dog of Hanging Hills. They say that if you see this ghostly dog once, it brings you good luck. If you see it twice, you'll face sorrow. But the third time, well, let's just say that it'll be the last time you'll ever see it. You're about to hear from Tristan, who is a school teacher and an avid hiker. One day, he was hiking the Hanging Hills with his wife, Christina, when they encountered something that is unexplainable. Tristan fully admits that he enjoys reading and researching urban legends, especially when they have some sort of historical significance. And it seems like his wife, Christina, falls into a similar category. However, she was raised Catholic, so from a young age, she was kind of taught not to necessarily believe in these types of legends. And I personally always find stories that have been corroborated by two or more people to be the most compelling. I must say that this story isn't the most frightening in the traditional sense, but there is something that has stuck with me since speaking with Tristan and Christina. I don't really know what it is, but it's just one of those things that makes like the skin crawl on the back of your neck. I really hope you enjoy this story as much as I did. This is episode 3, and the title is The Black Dog of Hanging Hills, and you're listening to the Close Encounter Club.
My name is Tristan. I am from Connecticut. I am a teacher. And on the side, I am a hiker and a writer. I'm into all things nature, and I really didn't start getting into the horror genre of writing until about a couple of years ago. But I've had some strange experiences throughout my life that are a little difficult to explain or comprehend. I've always considered myself a pretty open-minded person, but open-minded to a point. I believe that anything that's extraordinary requires evidence. And throughout my life, I've kind of carried this view with me. I watched various TV shows and listened to various podcasts where I can pick up right away if the podcaster or the person on the TV show is a skeptical person or not, or if they're, treating the paranormal normally. And I think before this experience, I was almost too skeptical in a way. And now I believe that there are some things out there that we can't explain. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're supernatural, but there are things in this world that just you can't conceptualize, you can't really comprehend without more meaning. So I've gotten into hiking because I was part of this club called the High Pointers Club with my dad. Basically, you hike the high point of every state. And it was a really cool experience because we got to travel all around when I was as young as 12 years old. It was really cool because at the time when you're a kid and you're hiking in all these different places, you're pretty much in peak shape. So I hiked wonderful mountains like Mount Whitney in California. It's beautiful because there's a natural lake on top of the mountain. And when you look above everything, you just see the natural world unfold. I've been to 41 states as a result, and I consider myself pretty lucky, and that's just for hiking. I've been to other states on my own, but growing up, I didn't really realize that other kids didn't have a chance to travel as much as I did. When I was a kid, I would access this website called Shadowlands, and I'm sure you remember back in the day using websites that had very minimal functioning to them. Like you had text and you had an image, and if you had a GIF image, I'm not even sure if they called them GIFs back then. It was very limited in what it could do. So you were pretty much reliant on just the words of the website themselves and as a kid, my friends and I were really drawn to the Shadowlands because these were supposedly haunted places existing right within our state. And this was an experience that we shared with kids all over the United States at the time who accessed this. Like, wow, my boring town, my little cow town has these hauntings with it. So there was a sense of intrigue at the time, especially when you're still processing the world. Now, a lot of the so-called haunted places were easily debunkable, but some of them had real history and real folklore behind them. So as a kid, I was always interested in going on Shadowlands and then later on going out with my friends and exploring those places. And sometimes you would explore them at a cost, because if you go into a graveyard at nighttime or you go onto somebody else's property, you risk being caught, you risk being arrested. But as a teenager, when your brain is still developing, I think that was part of the fun of the whole thing too. So when I first heard of the legend of the Black Dog of Hanging Hills, because of my connection with animals, I was really drawn to it. And plus there was something creepy about it too. The Black Dog of Hanging Hills is a legend that exists not only in Connecticut, but all over the world. Black dogs are said to bring disluck, they're said to bring sorrow, and sometimes evil. But this particular legend, as it exists, is that there is a black dog that exists in Hanging Hills. This is in the area of Meriden, Connecticut, so south central Connecticut. If you were to encounter the black dog once, it would be for joy, twice for sorrow, and 3 times for death. And the most interesting thing about the legend to me is that there were 2 geologists in the late 1800s who were studying the lands when they encountered a little black dog. Their names were W.H.C. Pineshaw and Herbert Marshall. They were both professors, I believe, at Trinity University in Hartford, Connecticut. And they had seen the black dog multiple times. What was interesting was W.H.C. Pineshaw was penning the encounters that he had. And it was a little black dog, probably, I would say, like a smaller black lab. And it was a cute and curious creature. I'm not sure if they had the legend in mind when they were hiking, but eventually it came to them because his friend Herbert had seen the dog twice before, and he actually stumbled to his death. Now, there are some rumors that Pineshaw also died later due to falling off the mountain, but this was untrue. So the fact that there's documented information about an actual geologist going with his friend to survey the land and encountering a supposedly evil black dog really brought the intrigue to my mind when I was researching the legend the first time. So this was a hike that I had done quite a few times before. Castle Craig is in this park called Hubbard Park in Meriden, Connecticut. At the top of the trail, you will see this stone tower, and it's really cool. I think it was built sometime in the early 1900s, and it was named after this guy named Walter Hubbard. So it has some historical relevance to it. And the day that we chose to hike was around April of 2014. My wife and I were dating for about 4 years at the time. And what had interested her was just going up and seeing the views and going up to the tower. And they were a little bit more normal, whereas my intrigue was based on the legend as well. The fact was that every time I had gone up the mountain beforehand, I had the legend in the back of my mind because I had read about it in 2002. So you're talking about 12 years of having this legend be something of an intrigue, and you find yourself hoping to see something. But we had 2 very different intentions that day. So the hike is not too long in length at all. There are various trails, but the whole trip totals really no more than about 3 miles. And there's another trail that you could take that we took that day where you go up to the top and then you hike down the road. The road extends to, I believe, this river or lake, and you could get back to the park that way. That may total around 4 miles or 4.5 miles. But basically, in order to prepare for that type of hike, you would pack lightly, bring some water, bring some snacks, and just dress comfortably for the day. It was an April type of day, if that makes sense at all. So the weather would be no more than maybe like 72 degrees out. So it was a normal day by all means. And there were quite a few hikers on the trail. And sometimes people actually run up the mountain, which is very ambitious. I've never even tried that myself. And there are just some people who go casually with their dogs up the mountain too. And I found it funny that every time I hike up the mountain, I saw plenty of people with their black labs or black dog mixed breeds. The weather was very clear, and it was the perfect day for hiking. You're talking about clear skies, sunshine, like just the right amount of sunshine. It was the perfect day to be outside and hike. This is what I would call almost ideal hiking weather. In my opinion, ideal hiking weather would be doing so in the fall, because the foliage in New England, particularly in Connecticut, is just beautiful. And I also love hiking when it's a little bit cooler outside. I'm talking about like 50-degree weather, but I'll also take 70-degree weather in April as well. So when you park at Castle Craig and you're going for the hike, you drive up a small hill, you park on the rocks, and you have to get there, I would say, earlier in the day, especially on a nice day like this. Otherwise, you'll be parking somewhere else. And there are plenty of parking spaces, but it's ideal to be right next to the trail. And the trail that I had chosen that day, I believe it was like the Blue Blaze Trail or something. And in hiking, there are different trail levels for different types of hikers. There's a Red Blaze Trail, which I did a couple of times in training for more difficult mountains in Vermont and New Hampshire, like those massive 5,000 footers that you climb up them and you feel like you're dead after you see the top. But the views are absolutely beautiful. So I actually did that trail, I would say, right after COVID, and it was just marvelous. But my wife at the time was fairly new to hiking, so I chose the simple and direct trail where it's straight up and straight down. And yes, you have a bigger hill to climb up, but then after that, you're at the castle and you can take some pictures, and it's pretty easy going down. Like I said, I had the legend of the black dog in the back of my mind because it had been there since I was a kid. And my wife at that point had been nice enough to entertain that legend, but I'm sure that she was a little bit sick of me telling the story and just wanted to go for a hike. In fact, I saw one hiker and I said to him, "Hey, you have a little legend on your hands," because it was a black dog. "Do plenty of people tell you that?" And he just kind of laughed and shrugged it off. When we were at the top of the mountain, we took pictures on the stone tower. We took pictures of the beautiful view of Meriden and the surrounding areas. And then we chose to go down the roadside because we wanted to go down by the river and take some pictures there. And it looks really no different than the type of paved roads you see on the highway or in your residential neighborhood, with the exception that there were trees and vast forests surrounding each side of the road. And there are some trails that intersect the road that you could take down. Some of them start at the park, some of them start at the side of the road. I think one of them starts at a different park altogether. So there are a number of like interlocking other trails that you can take. And when you're going down this road, you have to be mindful of the cars, of course, coming up and coming down. But at the same time, walking on pavement versus walking on rocks is preferable for a more, I would say, inexperienced hiker. So I was mindful of that as well. Things started to get a little bit weird when, out of nowhere, my wife and I saw this figure. It looked like a dog, but we couldn't be sure. It was about 10 or 15 feet away. And for some reason, it was blurry. It was like Mother Nature took the dog, put it in Photoshop mode, and gave it a blurry effect to it. And this type of blur I would describe for the audience would be like if you were to take a picture of something on an iPhone or an Android, and you would use the mode where you could focus in on either yourself or whatever you're taking a picture of and blur the background. And when you blur the background, you could still see the outline of the figures. So it was weird that way.
What was your first thought when you saw this thing?
Is this the black dog or is this something else? I could see it. Why is it blurry? Is it ghostly? Is it going to hurt me? No, it doesn't look like it's going to hurt me, but why can't we move? Why can't we do anything right now? And we kind of had an understanding of what this might be. Like, yes, this is a dog, but at the same time, it's blurry.
You had mentioned that your wife is generally more skeptical about this urban legend. What was her reaction?
She had reacted in such a manner that told me that she understood, where I wanted to move forward. I think part of my concern might have been, well, if this is just any old dog, you got to get it out of the road. But she was just like, no, don't stop. And we waited for it to cross. It didn't acknowledge us at all. But one thing that was strange is that when we looked at it, we couldn't discern all of its features. You could tell by the outline of the creature that it was definitely a dog. But like I said, for some reason, it was blurry. And the conditions were hazy that day. It wasn't rainy at all. And we were tired, but not so tired in the way that we would have hallucinated such a thing. We both saw this. And when we were down the mountain, we hadn't really talked about what we saw too much at all because it was strange. She and I had both seen this creature, most likely a dog, that looked blurry and it was close to us. And for some reason, I was too inhibited to take out my phone and take pictures of the dog. And later on, I would think, why didn't I take a picture? That would have been the ultimate thing. Now, the image quality probably wouldn't have been very good, but it would have made for some interesting discussions with friends, family members, and the online paranormal community, I would say. And I think for my wife, it was just the same type of uncertainty that I had and uncomfortableness because we both just left it alone. That was our first instinct. And we didn't want it to notice us because if it did, I mean, who knows?
So what happened right after the encounter? What did you and your wife do?
Before we moved on, I took a look into the woods, and there's still lots of leftover foliage from the fall. I didn't see any markings from the dog. I didn't see any footprints from it, and I didn't see it up ahead because if this was a stray dog, it might have been doing things such as trying to catch another animal or maybe even looking for its owner. Even if it was a dog that just for some reason naturally lived on the mountaintops, you would think that it would still exhibit normal dog-like behavior. But again, for some reason, didn't see any of that. It was like it had never been there at all. And we didn't have any luck afterward, nor did we have any sorrow, and we didn't see the creature again for a second time. So to this day, a decade later, I'm still not 100% sure on what we saw, just that we saw it. We didn't ever think this thing was evil at all. We just kind of knew that this was its territory, and we were maybe encouraging upon it.
All right, so we've just heard from Tristan, and after our first conversation, I asked Tristan if his wife would be interested in speaking with me to kind of corroborate his story. And he said yes, but there was definitely some hesitancy there. And I understand why, of course. Who wants to come onto a podcast and talk to someone like me, right? But I asked again and again, and I didn't want to be too pushy, but I really wanted to speak to Christina. And lo and behold, Tristan emailed me and said that it would really help his wife if she knew a little bit more about me. And again, I understand that I'm a new podcaster, so I wrote a quick little blurb about myself and my family and my education and what I do for a living besides trying to start a paranormal unexplained podcast. And to my delight, Christina replied, and she agreed to meet with me. So I asked her some of the same questions I asked Tristan. One thing that was interesting was there are some differences in their story. And to me, that doesn't really discount anything. After all, this was about a decade ago. But I find it really interesting. The core of their story remains very similar. So, without further ado, here is the conversation I had with Christina. So Tristan says that you're generally more skeptical about paranormal things than he is. Can you talk about your belief in the paranormal before this event?
Well, not to get religious, but I was raised Catholic. So with that concept, it's like very black and white. So as I got older, I got away from that. But with that in mind, I was skeptical. So I was like, okay, this is probably not a real thing. But I was not turned away from it either. So I was able to kind of enjoy it, but also be like, maybe not. And then more recently, I think coming along with the black dog piece, that really solidified it. That was surprising. And ever since then, I've been more aware of my surroundings, I guess you could say.
So what were your initial thoughts when Tristan told you about the legend of the black dog?
Well, I wasn't raised a hiker like he was, so that was a new thing to me too. But with that in mind, he was the one who actually told me about it. He was like, oh, so there's this legend of a black dog. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, okay, that's cool. And there's pictures. I don't know if it was online or if it was related to it, but one of those things, I had seen a picture of the black dog and I was like, that's different. But I wasn't quite buying it. And then when you're on the top of Castle Craig, you have a beautiful view of Connecticut. So that alone is enough to kind of, when you're hiking, that's what you're looking forward to. So that's where like my mind would go versus looking elsewhere. So with that working, I didn't really think about it. But when he told me about it, I was like, oh, that's cool. But nothing really set in. It was a hot day. I remember it being hot. I think it was spring, if I'm not mistaken. And with that kind of vibe, normally spring's not crazy hot. So it must have been, it felt unseasonable. But not in a bad way. And we started out where we normally start. So I look forward to going over a bridge that's on the highway. It's right over the highway. So you see the highway and then right in there you're in nature. And I was honestly looking forward to the peak. I get excited to go up to the castle and you get to go in the castle. So it's kind of fun. And that's kind of where my focus was. So we eventually got it up to the top, and we're like, oh, okay, that's cool. It's not a busy day. It must have been during the week. And we were on our way back down. What we normally do on our way up, we take the hiking trail, and on the way down, we take the regular trail. So where all the cars can go. We were just talking and walking. I don't even think we were talking about the legend in particular, but I was like, okay, whatever, we're just talking and hanging out. And I just remember I just stopped dead in my tracks when I saw the dog. I was just like, that's not what I think it is. Like, I had to process it for a second, because it was just like, what? How is that even possible at first? And it just stopped dead in my tracks. I think I stopped him when I said it. I was just like, oh, is that what I think it is? And it looked like, almost like a mirage. If you've ever seen the Wild West version of what's it called? Feifel. The Feifel Wild West movie, when he says, oh, it's just a mirage, that's what went through my head. It's like, oh, it's only a mirage. But when it had stopped and moved, that's when, and it had a gold, like almost like an aura around it. And it was very blurry. You couldn't see it. Like, you could make out that it was a dog, but you couldn't, it wasn't like what you would expect a dog to be. It's not very present, barking at you. It's there. It had an aura. It had almost like an orb. It was almost like a fuzzy picture to a certain degree, almost like a pixelated dog. And in pictures, it comes out like a regular dog, or at least it did. We didn't take any pictures because we were just too stunned, but it was just, whoa. I'd never seen anything like that before. I remember it passing us, or at least starting to walk, without any particularly different moves. It was definitely sniffing. And then when it stopped and walked, it had it, it was very upright. It didn't have any difference, and it just kind of trotted across us. But the way it did it, it was almost majestic. It wasn't quite, it was still like what you would expect a dog to do. But the way it was kind of almost carried, it seemed like it was carried versus by itself. So it was definitely walking across, but the haze made it a little bit harder to follow. It just was so pixelated that it almost looked like it was floating. Not so much that it would be like a traditional, oh, I'm going to trot across, but the fact that it was clearly looking for, and we actually waited. We thought maybe there would be like an owner or somebody to come by, and nobody came. We walked right past it, and we never saw it again.
What was your initial reaction after you saw it?
Honestly, it was, oh my God. That was the only thing, the first thing that popped out. After that, it was like, oh, that can't be real. That's not real. That's the mirage. Then it hit me when it moved. That's when it hit. Definitely just stunned. I don't even think I had words, because I didn't think we'd ever see it. And there's a legend of, if you see it once, it's one thing. If you see it twice, it's another thing. If you see it 3 times, you're pretty much dead meat. And we've only seen it that one time. But that one time, it was just complete shock. It was just, whoa.
As someone that tends to be more skeptical, was your brain trying to rationalize what you were seeing? Or did you immediately know that this was something paranormal?
I think it was, oh my God, first. And then I had to take a step back, because my rational side kicked in after it. So initially it was like, whoa, that can't be real. But as soon as it moved, that's where I was just like, and the fact that it was glowing, then pixelated. It was a hot day, but it wasn't like so hot that you'd be like sweating. It was just kind of a unseasonably hot April-ish day. So for it to be hazy on that kind of day was a little strange. So that was different compared to what we would normally see.
Were you scared at all when you saw it?
Not at all. If anything, it was a sense of calm that had never really, I didn't think would occur ever. If I ever even, not that I really thought about the paranormal, but it was because it was so surreal, it was almost calming. Like I could almost I felt very grounded in a weird kind of way. Not so much in like you're doing yoga way, but in I'm in the presence of something I've never seen. I think the best way to describe it is almost like you met a celebrity and you're running that off that high. So it was just, we've heard about this lore. We thought this was going to be a thing, but we never really thought we'd come encountered with it. And then when we did, we're like, that was so cool. And then walking the way down, we were in shock. So like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And the days after, we were kind of doing a little bit more research into it and seeing that this was a real thing. People have seen it before. And it was just like between the state of shock and the state of excitement, the coming down took a couple of days just because it was just shocking. We were shocked and we were amazed. We were excited. It was just it was an amalgamation of a lot of things.
How would you describe Tristan reacted when he saw the figure?
We both had this, we just literally, it was kind of like our Home Alone moment. We just kind of looked at each other and then looked back at the dog and just really, his like jaw was agape. He couldn't even talk. And it was just like, I think that's what I think it is. And we both went silent too. We just stayed, we kept our distance, and he or she, the dog, was just doing its own thing. And we both just stopped and watched it. We didn't say anything. We just were silent. Normally, both of us, we love animals. We'd be the first thing to be like, oh, you're so cute. We love you. But in this case, it was just, we're just going to let this do what it has to do. So, but he was just shocked. He was just like, I think that's the black dog. And we were just shocked.
How has this experience changed your belief in the paranormal?
I think it makes me more open-minded to the reality that there are just some things that we can't explain. I don't automatically think that this is a ghost dog or something, but I could see why my mind in the moment led me to believe it. And it also brought me to the reality that sometimes our perceptions aren't the best. Sometimes what we see, we can't really make sense of, and we can't rationalize.
Has this experience made you think twice, or maybe make you a little bit afraid to go back on that same hike near Castle Craig?
Yep, every time. And it's actually, we are so close to it, it's pretty much in our backyard now. And I'm reminded of the mountain every time I see it. So whenever I go there, I'm just like, I'm going to focus on the hike. I'm not going to think about the dogs because I don't want to ruin what I saw. And I shut myself off compared to being open to it, which I think comes with age. So when you're younger and you learn about it and you're a little bit more open to it, it's one thing. But when you've experienced it, it's a little bit more, you have to be closed off because you want to protect what happened and you also don't want to have more interference that could be more negative.
What about you, Tristan? Are you afraid to go back?
No, because I never saw it again. And a part of me thinks that I'm not going to. I don't know why. Maybe just that I encountered it once. And even if I can't explain it, it satisfied my curiosity. But at the same time, I took so much more away from it.
Do you have any advice for someone that is going to be hiking the hanging hills of Connecticut and may encounter the black dog?
I think you have to just be open. Even when you've heard about it and it may be completely out of your mind, if it happens, just let it happen. It's not so much of a, this is going to hurt you. You can't automatically be defensive. You can be guarded, but not defensive. And I think a lot of skepticism comes from fear, and it comes from not knowing. So when you come from a state of fear versus a state of understanding, it makes a big difference. And in skepticism compared to knowing, definitely there's a divide. So if you make yourself aware of the lore, like I'm sure there's other mountains that have very similar ways of being. So being aware of it definitely helps. And even when it doesn't, if you hype yourself up, you hear about it and you're like, oh, it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. But if you are willing to hear the story, take it in, and just kind of go about your day, that it'll come to you whether or not you are willing. But if it comes to you and you're willing, be open to it.
What do you think you actually saw that day?
I think I saw a dog in my heart of hearts because I've seen dogs all throughout my life. But the question still lingers, was it a ghost dog? Was it an entity? Or was it a trick on our imagination? And I'm comfortable for the first time in years with the fact that I don't know. And that's okay. Sometimes it's okay not to know what you see. So sometimes it's just fun to imagine, what it could be. And it would be really cool to come up with like a rational explanation as well, or a psychological explanation. If any of your listeners have one, that would be great to hear too. But, to this day, I haven't been able to come up with one. And I think that's what's so cool about the story.
And what about you, Christina? Do you have any doubts about what you saw that day?
I have no doubt in my mind that that's what we saw. Although I am a little apprehensive to go back, because I am a little bit hesitant to seeing it again. And we have gone back and we've never seen it. But I do hold that hesitancy because we had such a good experience, but a good vision kind of, and a good way of experiencing it, that I don't want that to be changed. So, and I do tend to shut it off when we're there. I try to focus just on the hike.
All right. So you just heard from Tristan and Christina about their encounter with the black dog of Hanging Hills. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, I really think the biggest part that stands out to me is that they both encountered this thing. If it was just Tristan walking in the woods of Connecticut and he saw something that was unexplainable, it would be easily discounted, probably even by Tristan himself, to be honest, because it wasn't a shared experience. You could easily say that Tristan was dehydrated or just saw some sort of optical illusion at the time. And since he was already kind of looking for the black dog of Hanging Hills while he was hiking, 1 + 1 = 2. This is why I'm really happy and thankful that I was able to speak with Christina, because her aspect of the story is what really makes this encounter more believable. I want to give a special shout out to both Tristan and Christina for sharing their story with me and with all of you. I really enjoyed my time speaking with them. They seem like very awesome people. And frankly, if we lived closer, I probably would be friends with them outside of a podcast. And thanks to all of you for listening to this episode and for being a member of the Close Encounter Club. Please remember to like and subscribe and to hit that follow button. Also, just a reminder, leaving a 5-star review will really help this podcast be exposed to a broader audience, and it does go a long way. So if you're feeling down for it, I would greatly appreciate that. If you or someone you know has a story that they would like to share on this podcast, please email us at stories@closeencounterclub.com.